Good morning to all of you. So today we are going to study the next step of shock, that is neurogenic shock. We started the shock classes with compensatory mechanism, then we studied about hypovolemic shock, next class was on cardiogenic shock. So this is we are going to study about neurogenic shock. So, neurogenic shock is a distributive type of shock. Now, what do you mean by distributive shock? Distributive shock is also known as vasodilatory shock that causes inadequate tissue perfusion. So, there is systemic vasodilation which leads to decreased blood flow to the brain, heart and kidneys, which causes damage to the vital organs. Okay? Now, what do you mean by distributive shock? So, here is the issue is vasodilatation. The blood vessels are dilated. So, when the blood vessels are dilated, this leads to inadequate tissue perfusion. Okay. So, systemic why does it do so? Because systemic vasodilation which causes decreased blood flow to the brain, heart and kidney and causing damage to the vital organs. There is inadequate tissue perfusion because blood flow is not there. Suppose if you take a pipe and if you dilate to a great extent, so what happens is the flow with which the fluid was flowing, that becomes very slow. Suppose if you take a water pipe and if you stretch it to a greater extent, so what happens is there is pooling of water in that area and flow does not occur. So, that is the issue which causes inadequate tissue perfusion because of systemic vasodilatation. And the issue is the major or vital organs like brain, heart and kidneys, they get damaged because they have less blood supply. In neurogenic shock, vasodilation, now in neurogenic shock vasodilatation is there. See, we are talking about neurogenic shock is a distributive type of shock. And what is distributive? It is vasodilatation. So, vasodilatation occurs in neurogenic shock. Why? Because of a result of loss of balance between parasympathetic and sympathetic stimulation. We know that our body has an autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system is divided into parasympathetic and sympathetic. Sympathetic nervous system is related to fight and flight mechanism, and parasympathetic nervous system is related to a calm state, may be related to salivation, then taking rest after intake of food, etc., etc. Okay. So, we have a balance between these two, sympathetic and parasympathetic, but issue here in neurogenic shock is there is loss of balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Okay. So, I think you have understood the topic. The point to be stressed here is it is a type of distributive shock. Distributive shock is a type of shock when there is vasodilation which causes less blood supply to the vital organs. Third is neurogenic shock occurs because there is an imbalance between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Now, this is a definition. Neurogenic shock is a devastating consequence of spinal cord injury. Okay. Spinal cord injury is called as SCI. It manifests as hypotension, bradycardia, temperature dysregulation due to peripheral vasodilatation following an injury to the spinal cord. Okay. We know that spinal cord has spinal nerves. So, if that is getting affected, there are some issues which we are going to study in the pathophysiology. Okay. So, neurogenic shock occurs due to spinal cord injury. So, what are the symptoms? It manifests as hypotension and bradycardia. We have studied all different types of shock till now. So, in all those places when compensatory mechanism sets in, there is tachycardia, not bradycardia, but neurogenic shock has bradycardia. There is temperature dysregulation also due to peripheral vasodilatation. Another definition is it is a type of shock which is life threatening, where there is insufficient blood flow, that is caused by sudden loss of signals from the sympathetic nervous system that maintains the normal muscle tone in the blood vessel wall. We know that the blood vessel to maintain the tone of the blood vessel, we need the stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system. So, here is during due to the spinal cord injury or different causes which we are going to study later. So, there is sudden loss of signals from the sympathetic nervous system, and this sudden loss of signal from the sympathetic nervous system, that causes the loss of muscle tone in blood vessel wall, and when there is loss of muscle tone, the blood vessels get dilated. Okay. So, when there is loss of muscle tone, the blood vessels get dilated, and when the blood vessels get dilated, there will be pooling of blood in that area. Okay. So, I think you have understood here the issues. Now, I would like to just differentiate between neurogenic shock and spinal shock. Many people get confused, but these are two different entities. Neurogenic shock describes the hemodynamic changes resulting from sudden loss of autonomic tone. So, this autonomic tone is the general activity of the autonomic nervous system, which includes the sympathetic as well as parasympathetic nervous system. Okay. So, this results from a sudden loss of autonomic tone due to spinal cord injury, and this is common when the level of injury is above T6. We know that we have C1 to 7 and T1 to 12. So, if the injury is above T6, neurogenic shock occurs. Okay. If it is commonly seen when the level of injury is above 6 thoracic. Now, spinal shock on the other hand refers to loss of all sensation below the level of injury and is not circulatory in nature. Okay. See, two things are there, neurogenic shock and spinal shock. Neurogenic shock occurs due to spinal cord injury, agreed. When there is spinal cord injury above T6, there is neurogenic shock which leads to vasodilatation. Now, we have spinal shock. Spinal shock again is caused due to spinal cord injury, but here issue is we use the word spinal shock when there is loss of sensation, when there is loss of sensation below the level of injury and it is not circulatory in nature. What do you mean by this? In spinal cord injury there is no vasodilatation. Okay. I think the concept is clear now. Neurogenic shock also occurs due to spinal cord injury. Spinal shock also is due to spinal cord injury. If the injury is above T6, it leads to neurogenic shock which causes vasodilatation. If there is loss of sensation below the level of injury, whichever, see, we have a long spinal cord, whichever place it is injured, if there is loss of sensation, it is called as spinal shock. I think the concept is clear now, but in cases of spinal shock, there is no vasodilatation. There is no vasodilatation. That is why it is written it is not circulatory in nature. So, that is the difference between neurogenic shock and spinal shock. Now, the basic pathophysiology is this one. There is stimulation which causes stimulation of sympathetic as well as parasympathetic. I will be explaining in the subsequent slides, which is followed by vasodilatation. Vasodilatation will cause hypotension, hypotension will cause cardiovascular changes, and cardiovascular changes will cause insufficient perfusion. Okay. Now, what are these which we are going to study? Now, sympathetic stimulation. So, whenever there is any spinal cord injury, so sympathetic stimulation causes constriction of vascular smooth muscle. Okay. We are talking about the blood vessels. Okay. So, there is vascular smooth muscle, sympathetic stimulation causes this. Parasympathetic stimulation causes relaxation or dilation of vascular smooth muscle. So, we know that sympathetic and parasympathetic have opposite action. So, sympathetic nervous system stimulation, not sympathetic stimulation causes constriction of vascular smooth muscle, whereas parasympathetic nervous system causes relaxation or dilation. But issue here is there is predominant parasympathetic stimulation, and because of this predominant मतलब sympathetic stimulation के हिसाब से parasympathetic stimulation is more, it is more, ज़्यादा है. So, that is why there is more relaxation of dilation of vascular smooth muscle. Okay. Now, there is, because predominantly the parasympathetic nervous system is activated. So this causes vasodilation lasting for an extended period of time. तो issue क्या हुआ? There is displacement of blood volume. So that is why it is called as distributive shock. Okay. So there is the blood, the amount of blood which should be there normally, that gets displaced, and then because vasodilatation causes pooling of blood. So there is displacement of blood volume which causes hypovolemic state. So there is drastic decrease in the patient's systemic vascular resistance and bradycardia. So because of this hypovolemia, because there is massive vasodilatation, so this drastically decreases the patient's systemic vascular resistance, and this causes bradycardia, the heart rate falls down. So this causes, when there is pooling of blood, so this causes inadequate blood pressure, and when there is decreased BP, so naturally it causes insufficient perfusion of tissues and cell. I would like to just repeat, whenever there is injury, we have a sympathetic stimulation which causes constriction of blood vessel. There is parasympathetic nervous system which relaxes the blood vessels, vascular smooth muscle, but the parasympathetic stimulation is more. So this causes vasodilatation which continues to an extended period of time. So as long as it is continued, there is more displacement of blood volume which causes hypovolemia, and this leads to bradycardia and fall in BP. Okay. So whenever there is fall in BP, there will be insufficient perfusion of tissues and cells. Now the statistics is 8,000 to 10,000 people experience traumatic spinal cord injury per year. So this many people are there, and out of this the spinal cord injury is 19 neurogenic shock. See, these are all spinal cord injuries, but neurogenic shock occurred in 19.3%. So it is less as compared to other type of shock. Okay. Another study was there which identified 490 isolated spinal cord injury. Okay. Now, what are the causes? First is spinal cord injury. So spinal cord injuries usually may be in cases of roadside accidents or fall from a height, etc. All these things can cause spinal cord injury. So spinal cord injury is recognized to cause hypotension, bradycardia, which we have already studied. Next is spinal anesthesia. So in spinal anesthesia, all of you must have seen spinal anesthesia. We introduce the needle between L3 and L4. Okay. So when we are introducing the needle between L3 and L4, so if it is done repeatedly, or if there is severance means if the nerves are damaged, if the spinal nerves are damaged, so this causes a fall in BP because of dilatation of blood vessels in the lower part of the body, and the result is less venous return to the heart. Okay. The issue here in spinal anesthesia is if the spinal nerves get damaged. Okay. If the spinal nerves get damaged, suppose if you have an unskilled anesthetist or somebody who is giving spinal anesthesia, if he is not skilled, so he may require repeated attempts to give spinal anesthesia. So once repeated attempts are there, so the issue is the spinal nerves gets affected. So when the spinal nerves gets affected, so this causes a fall of blood pressure because of dilatation of blood. So when there is vasodilatation, the issue is less amount of blood comes back. ठीक है, जो blood हाथ पैर suppose spinal आपने दिया, पैर में more amount of blood gets collected, it's not coming back क्योंकि blood vessels are dilated. So when is this we know that we have superior vena cava, inferior vena cava. Superior vena cava से blood आ रहा है, पर inferior vena cava से ठीक से blood वापस नहीं आ रहा है. So once you have less amount of blood coming from the lower part of the body because of pooling of blood, less blood reaches the right side of the heart, and because less blood is reaching the right side of the heart, less blood is reaching lungs. Because less blood is reaching the lungs, less oxygenated supply of blood is there. So this causes a vicious cycle. Next is depressant action of medications. Okay, some medications because of the depressant action and also lack of glucose can cause neurogenic shock. for example, diazepam, Alprax. So, these are all depresses the central nervous system, diazepam and Alprax, etc. Then is pain can also cause neurogenic shock by overexciting the parasympathetic nervous system. Pain due to any severe condition. So, this overexcites the parasympathetic nervous system. So, what does it lead? It leads to bradycardia. So, whenever there is neurogenic shock, there is bradycardia, which in turn decreases the pulse and leads to dangerous drop in blood pressure. Okay. Now, what are the signs and symptoms? So, till now I was talking about cool clammy skin. Okay. So, instead of cool moist skin, here the patient experiences dry warm skin. So, till now we were talking about cool and clammy skin, but here instead of cool and clammy, the symptoms will be dry and warm. Why this? Because of vasodilatation and inability to vasoconstrict. So, that is why the skin will be dry and the skin will be warm. Hypotension due to sudden massive dilation. Bradycardia, the patients instead of getting tachycardia, the patient will be having bradycardia. Okay. So, this is how the heart rate will be less than 60. Then the person will have diaphragmatic breathing. Okay. Now, how to do diaphragmatic breathing? You can study. So, here diaphragmatic will be the breathing will be there if the injury is below the 5th cervical vertebra. Okay. So, if the injury is below the 6th vertebra, the patients will exhibit diaphragmatic breathing due to loss of nervous control in the intercostal muscles. Okay. We know that we use intercostal muscles for a normal breathing. Okay. The issue here is if the injury is below the 5th cervical vertebra, the control over intercostal means those muscles which are present between the ribs, they are called as intercostal muscles. So, we are unable to control those muscles. So, this causes, because see somehow we have to breathe. We normally use intercostal muscles, because intercostal muscles are unable to be used because of the injury. So, the patient will exhibit diaphragmatic breathing. So, this is how diaphragmatic breathing is there. Okay. When the patient is inhaling and exhaling, inhaling the diaphragm comes down and exhaling the diaphragm goes above. Okay. So, this is diaphragmatic breathing. Then if the injury is above the 3rd cervical vertebra, immediately respiratory arrest. Okay. So, you have to see this. If the injury is below 5th, diaphragmatic breathing. If the injury is above 3rd, the patient will go into respiratory arrest immediately because of loss of nervous control of the diaphragm. The diaphragm will not be able to control at all. So, instead of diaphragm coming up, going down, the diaphragm will not facilitate. So, that is why this leads to respiratory arrest if the injury is above the 3rd cervical. Now, what are the assessment and diagnostic finding? CT scan has to be there, so that we can know which type of injury it is. X-rays can be done. Okay, whenever there is a spinal cord injury, what is the which bone is affected, all these things. Here we are concerned about the vertebra, which vertebra is affected, we can see through X-rays. Then MRI also we can have a detailed image. Now, how to manage? Medical management is restoring sympathetic tone. So, this is either through stabilization of a spinal cord injury, or suppose if it is due to spinal anesthesia, by positioning the patient appropriately. Okay. So, here is we suppose if it is a case of spinal cord injury, our main focusing is the patient needs to be stabilized. If it is due to spinal anesthesia, then positioning the patient appropriately is the main point to be considered. Second is immobilization. If the patient has a suspected case of spinal cord injury, a traction may be needed to stabilize the spine to bring it to a proper alignment. Once the spine is aligned properly, then the patient is put in traction. You must have seen how traction is given in the orthopedic ward by using weights. Okay. Next is we give IV fluid, because the BP falls very sharply. So, we need IV fluids. Then we need inotropic agents such as dopamine may be infused for fluid resuscitation. See, here is we need in the previous in hypovolemic in cardiogenic shock, I was explaining you about dopamine and dobutamine. Okay. So, inotropic agents are those agents which causes a change in the contractility of the heart. So, dopamine is also a positive inotropic agent because it causes the increased contractility of the heart. Okay. Atropine is given intravenously to manage severe bradycardia. Now, why atropine has multiple actions. Here we give atropine, why? Because it increases heart rate and improves the atrioventricular conduction by blocking the parasympathetic influences in the heart. Okay. So, we studied in the basic problem in neurogenic shock is parasympathetic tone is more than sympathetic tone. So, we give atropine to block that parasympathetic tone. So, that is why we are giving atropine. Okay. So, atropine causes an increase in heart rate. So, now we have bradycardia. Okay. Now, in neurogenic shock, the patient has having bradycardia. So, atropine will cause an improvement in the heart rate. So, this will reduce the problem of bradycardia, and not only that, this blocks the parasympathetic influences of the heart. Okay. And improves the atrioventricular conduction. We know that we know AV node, SA node, AV node, Purkinje fibers, bundle of His, all these things we know. So, the atrioventricular conduction is made better by atropine. So, atropine is a very important drug to manage bradycardia in neurogenic shock. Then we need to give steroids. Okay. Steroids with obvious patients with obvious neurological deficit can be given IV steroid. Say we give methylprednisolone. It is not only prednisolone, it is methylprednisolone in high dose, and this is within 8 hours of commencement of neurogenic shock. So, it has to be given within 8 hours. So, why do we give this? Because this reduces the extent of permanent paralysis during the rest of the patient's life. So, to manage neurogenic shock is very, very important, and it has been seen that if you give steroids before 8 hours of within 8 hours of neurogenic shock, so the residual paralysis or the extent of permanent paralysis can be reduced. So, now we have two types of steroids, one is prednisolone and second is methylprednisolone. So, methylprednisolone is stronger as compared to prednisolone. Why? Because 4 mg of methylprednisolone is as good as 5 mg of prednisolone. ठीक है, 4 methylprednisolone 4 mg is equal to 5 mg of prednisolone. So, that is why this is methylprednisolone is better choice as compared to prednisolone. Next is heparin. Okay. So, heparin is given. So, heparin is given because of the spinal cord injury, there are chances of two things. One is deep vein thrombosis and second is pulmonary embolism. Okay. So, whenever in cases of spinal cord injury and deep vein thrombosis is usually present in those patients who are unable to move their or there is loss of sensation, or there is when they are unable to move the legs. Okay. So, this predisposes the patient for deep vein thrombosis and pulmonary embolism. So, heparin or low molecular weight heparin may be used to prevent thrombus formation. Okay. Now, with nursing assessment for ABC, we need to the pre-hospital provider should provide airway, breathing and circulation approach to trauma patient for protecting the spine from any extra injury. So, that is very important. Somebody, suppose if somebody is bringing a patient with spinal injury, so they have to focus on airway, breathing and circulation, and at the same time ensure that the spine is not moved. Okay. Immobilization is very, very important. Neurological assessment has to be done. So, neurological deficit and a general level at which abnormalities begin should be identified. So, we should identify whether some neurological deficits are there, and if it is there when it started, all these things we need to find. Nursing diagnosis is risk for impaired breathing pattern due to impairment of innervation of diaphragm, that is lesions at or above C5. So, whenever there is injury at or above C5, there are chances for diaphragmatic breathing. Okay. So, the risk of impaired breathing pattern because the intercostal muscles are not under the control. Next is risk of trauma related to temporary weakening or instability of spinal column. So, there is risk of trauma. Next is risk impaired physical mobility because there is related to neuromuscular impairment, disturbed sensory perception related to destruction of sensory tract with altered sensory reception, transmission and integration. These sense organs also may get damaged. This all will depends on which level the injury is there. Okay. So, there is altered sensory perception, okay, transmission and integration. Then there is acute pain related to pooling of blood secondary to thrombus formation. Okay. So, if you have a deep vein thrombosis, so whenever you have thrombus, there will be pooling of blood proximal to the clot. Proximal मतलब clot के पहले के भाग में there is pooling of blood क्योंकि blood आगे जा नहीं पा रहा because of the blood. So, this causes acute pain. Now, what is the nursing care planning and goals? Maintain adequate ventilation as evidenced by absence of respiratory distress and ABGs within acceptable limit. So, how do you know ventilation is good? Because the patients will not be having respiratory distress, and if you do arterial blood gas, so that will be within the acceptable limits. Then demonstrate appropriate behaviors to support respiratory efforts, maintain proper alignment of spine without further spinal cord damage, that is very important. Maintain position of function as evidenced by absence of contractures and foot drop. So, that is why we also need to ensure that the child that the person does not develop foot drop. So, we use sign back. So, these are the goals. Then increase strength of the unaffected or compensatory body parts. So, which of their parts is unaffected, we have to increase the strength of those parts. Next is demonstrate techniques or behavior that enable the resumption of activity. So, as soon as the patient is able, the activity has to be resumed, and recognize sensory impairments. So, that is very important to find out whether sensory impairment is there or not, or if it is there, what is the state of affairs. Then identify behaviors to compensate for deficit. So, if you have a deficit, now how to compensate? So, that has to be identified. Then verbalize awareness of sensory needs and potential for deprivation or overload. Now, nursing intervention, what we need to do is elevate the head of the bed. Okay. Suppose if it is a case of spinal anesthesia, so elevation of head helps to prevent the spread of anesthetic agent up to the spinal cord when the patient receives spinal or epidural anesthesia. So, elevation head has to be there, otherwise the medicines will go and can go even to the brain. Okay. So, that has to be decreased. Second is lower extremity intervention, applying anti-embolism stockings. Anti-embolism stockings are present, and so which will not allow the clots to form by deep vein thrombosis. Okay. Then is elevating the foot of the bed. So, when we elevate the foot of the bed, the issue is pooling of blood can be decreased and thus prevent thrombus formation. Then passive range, see this is passive range of motion exercises. Okay. So, passive range of motion of the immobile extremity has to be done, so that this causes promotion of circulation. Then maintenance of airway. So, this is oral airway. Okay. This all you must have seen in the ward. So, maintain patent airway. So, what do we do is we keep head in the neutral position, elevate the head of the blood slightly if it is tolerated, and if required we use airway adjuncts. Airway adjuncts are oral airway. So, what is the advantage? So, this is used to maintain or open. Maintain means suppose if it is already open, then we try to maintain it, or if it is not there, we try to open it. So, what is the advantage of urine of using this oral airway? Airway using a oral airway does not, we know that we keep it above the tongue, and this does not cause the fall of tongue over the epiglottis. So, if there is fall of tongue over the epiglottis, the issue is the patient will not be able to breathe. So, to prevent backflow of the backfall of the tongue over the epiglottis, we use this airway adjuncts. Airway adjuncts means this is oral airway. Next is oxygen. So, because we know BP is less, circulatory failure is there. So, we administer oxygen. So, what do? We use the nasal prongs, maybe mask, intubation, ventilator, which depends on the condition of the patient. And plan activities to provide uninterrupted rest period and encourage involvement within individual tolerance and ability. Okay. So, this has to be there. Whatever things you want to do to the patient, try to complete all the things together at one time, instead of time and again going and disturbing the patient. So, that the patient is able to take rest, and at the same time whatever extent the patient can do, we have to identify that within the individual tolerance and ability. Then BP needs to be monitored, because hypotension is the major symptom, and reduce anxiety. Okay. So, this has to be reduced. Assist patient to recognize and compensate for alteration sensation. So, whichever area there is changed perception, so that needs to be managed. Okay. Now, what is evaluation? Maintained adequate ventilation, demonstrated appropriate behavior to support respiratory effort, maintained proper alignment of spine without further spinal cord damage, and maintained position of function. Okay. So, these are, because these were the goals. So, our evaluation is, we have all done all these things. Next is increased strength of the unaffected or compensatory body part. So, whichever part is not affected, so activity is increased more with those parts. So, demonstrated techniques or behaviors that enable resumption of activity. So, whatever part which does not have any loss of sensation or which can be used properly, so that has to be enhanced. Then recognized sensory impairments, identified behavior to compensate for deficits. Okay. Suppose if deficit is there, to what extent are you able to compensate for that? Then verbalized awareness of sensory needs and potential for deprivation of overload. So, whatever sensory issues are there, so that has to be verbalized. Now, what is the prognosis? Neurogenic shock is extremely dangerous, because it causes the BP to drop drastically, and it can cause irreversible damage, and if it is not treated, even death can be there. So, patient with complete spinal cord injury have less than 5% chance of recovery. So, that is a basic issue, and if complete paralysis persists at 72 hours, within 3 days, if the paralysis is not gone, then recovery is essentially 0. Then the patient will not recover at all. So, that was all about today's topic of neurogenic shock. I hope you have understood the topic. Thank you for a patient listening.